because we cannot predict our weather anymore. Our weather is fucked, and if you can't predict the weather, you can't farm. If you don't know when it's going to rain, you don't know when it's going to be a frost, you can't farm. Last week, India banned wheat exports. Massive wheat producing country, massive supplier of global commodities like wheat around the world. India has banned wheat exports because it can't grow enough for itself anymore, because it's spent the last month suffering under a 55-degree heat wave. We are heading for major global food shortages, and what the social science tells us when we get major food shortages globally is we have civil unrest, we have breakdown, we have social breakdown. So we're at 1.2 degrees now. Most climate scientists think we'll hit 3 degrees by the end of this century. I don't know anyone serious who seriously tries to argue that we could have organised human society in a 3-degree world. It's not going to happen. The big threat of climate change is the collapse of society. That's how serious this is. So, how can this be allowed to happen, right? All the information is out there, and it's just, I just find it the most bizarre thing that this knowledge that we have, all this scientific information has not been enough to lead to any of the required changes. I've been aware of these changes since I was really, really young, and I've always wanted to do something about protecting the natural world, so I became a scientist. I thought that was what we had to do. I thought, if we suffer big problems, then we need to understand those problems. We need to get information, understand them, and if we give that information to our leaders, obviously they'll use that to make wise decisions. How fucking naive. Because that's not how it works. This idea that as scientists we could just generate the information and it will lead to good things, that's not how it works. And climate change is a wonderful example of that. We've been talking about climate change for 40 years. Our governments agreed to start decarbonising 30 years ago at the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. They formed this big thing called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and every year since then they've been meeting to discuss what they're going to do about it. So those meetings are called COPs, and last year we had COP26. It was the 26th year in a row governments had met to talk about climate change. We know that the number one thing we need to do to avert climate change is stop burning fossil fuels, because fossil fuels are responsible for 82% of our emissions. So turn off the taps. That's what we have to do. This political process, this COP process, at the end of every meeting, they publish like their agreement. This is what we discussed. This is our agreement this year. Would anyone like to guess when was the first time this COP document ever mentioned oil and gas? Almost. Last year it mentioned coal. Coal was mentioned in the COP agreement for the first time. Oil and gas have still never been mentioned. So you've got the governments of the world meeting together to discuss what to do about the problem. They know that 82% of that problem is burning fossil fuels, and they have never once talked about, not even agreed, even talked about stopping burning fossil fuels. And the reason is that fossil fuel companies have a seat at that negotiating table. The largest single delegation at COP26 was lobbyists from the fossil fuel industry. Over 500 professional fossil fuel lobbyists. And of course, when those that have a vested interest in preventing the change we need have the biggest seat at the negotiating table, of course, the change is not going to happen. So, I think it's increasingly clear to me that science just isn't going to do it. Providing the information isn't going to do it. So I've left my job as a university lecturer to concentrate more on other things, including activism, and I take action with Scientist Rebellion and Scientists for XR. If information alone is not enough to lead to good governmental decision making, then that indicates that it's actually about power and influence. It's not about knowledge. And that's why I act with Scientist Rebellion, because that is how I can be powerful. Writing a scientific paper, even translating it into a way that policymakers can understand and sending it directly to those policymakers, it doesn't achieve anything, because powerful, influential people are pushing them in the wrong direction. And we see this very clearly in the behaviour of the UK government. So the UK government, like all governments, is trying to deceive us. They are absolutely gaslighting us. It's disgusting. So they are saying all the right words. They are setting decarbonisation targets, and they're talking all the talk. But it's not words that's going to decarbonise our economy. It's policies and it's actions. And when we look at the actions of the UK government, they are all completely incompatible with these decarbonisation targets they've set. We have a £27 billion road building programme. They've approved a new coal mine in Cumbria, which even the coal industry says it doesn't want. They've approved loads of new oil and gas fields in the North Sea. Large earlier was talking about the Jackdaw gas field that's just been opened. They're pushing the expansion of airports. All the government's policies are locking us into a deadly fossil fuel based future. And so the way I see it is that we simply, you know, for a long time we've been sort of appealing to our governments to try and make the required changes, but appealing to power is clearly not working. 3-4 years ago, when these environmental civil disobedience movements really started, then appealing to our governments for change was a sensible tactic. Since then, they've made it clear that they have chosen genocide. They have chosen a path that will lead to the destruction of all we love. And they are doing it deceitfully. So that leaves us no option but to stop trying to appeal to them and instead take the power back. So we're in a race against time, essentially. With planetary heating, we're going to reach tipping points. We're going to reach certain planetary tipping points beyond which we cannot prevent runaway climate change. And these may happen on a timescale of decades. They might already have been passed. But on the other side of the equation, we are racing towards social tipping points too. The only way we can make the changes we need is people power. It's people power. We need to either, we need to build a mass movement so powerful we either force our leaders to take the required changes, or we replace them with others that will. And I firmly believe the only path we have left is mass resistance. And so that's why I don't do science anymore. I try to communicate this crisis, and I take part in action. So I took part in the first mass arrest of scientists in the climate crisis in Glasgow last year at COP26. 21 of us were arrested. We blocked a bridge with chains around our necks, and we got big media attention because of it. Because a mass arrest of scientists is not something you see every day. How on earth? Yeah, what else can I do to make it clear just how fucking serious this is than to put my liberty on the line and to do things like that? So that's what I'm doing now. That is the work now. There's lots of ways to get involved. In all sorts, you know, beyond my scientist group, there's all sorts of different activism groups. If you're interested in animal welfare, animal agriculture, join Animal Rebellion. If you're interested in, whatever you're interested in, there's a group for you. Whatever it is you want to do, whatever it is you can contribute, there's a role for you. Not everyone in the Air Force is a pilot, and not everyone in Extinction Rebellion is gluing themselves to a road. You know, when we have these actions, we need all sorts of people in non-arrestable roles. We need people to do the photography and the live streaming. We need people to chat to the bystanders so they understand what's going on. We need people to bring cakes to the lock-ons and make them feel loved. We need help building our movement. We need help fundraising. We need help doing social media. We need help with everything. And honestly, it will be the most worthwhile thing you ever do. So join us. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Charlie Gardner, everyone. Not sure if you all heard every part of that, but in every single sentence was a terrifying fact that should be in headlines every single day, that should have our government officials and our corporate leaders terrified for our future, right? And Dr. Gardner's very, very right in that a few years ago, when all of these climate change movements came about, the spirit then was high, because we thought that our governments and our leaders weren't aware of the fact, weren't aware of the situation. We were so optimistic. We thought that if we brought the science and the facts of climate change to public awareness, to the centre of everybody's attention, that surely the people in power would act, would do the right thing, would make the right decisions, and that the people who hold the power would save us, would save our children, would save our futures, would save our food systems, would save our planet. Our planet is going to become uninhabitable in the next 50 years. Countries underwater, entire countries. How many millions, hundreds of thousands of millions of refugees does that mean for us here in the weather privileged in the UK? We already know how our government treats our refugees, right? Do we have to talk about that? Yes, of course we have to talk about that. If we're already deporting them to Rwandan refugee camps, how are we going to cope when entire countries are underwater? You know, Shell and BP, their HQs are in the UK. Fossil fuels are responsible for 82% of, what was it? The damage that that is resulting in climate change. What are we doing? It's in the UK that all of this damage is being thought about, is being perpetuated. These companies are headquartered in the UK, and it's countries in the global south that are feeling the effects of it first. Over here, we're having earlier springs, earlier summers, we're out here sunbathing, we're having a hell of a good time. But our families, my families, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia, they are dying now. What are we going to do about it? Because it's clear that the people in power aren't going to do anything about it, right? So we were optimistic a few years ago. If we brought the facts to light, if we brought them to the table, the people in power would make these decisions, would make these changes. But no, our governments have chosen genocide. So it's up to us, it's up to you. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Thanks so much. Our next talk is on at 4 o'clock with Dr. Bob Gill. Hope to see you then.